The Pro Show is brought to you by Rockin' Media and our proprietary Flash HDR photo process, providing you with the best, most realistic photos of your property. See the difference at rockinmedia.com. Hi everyone, Rick Machle from The Pro Show, and we have a great show for you today. We're talking about getting your home on the market and whether you should do it quickly, and if so, why, and if not, why not? So that's one of the discussions we're going to have. We'll also have a couple of horror stories since this is Halloween week. In addition to that, Nancy will talk about mortgages, and Greg will be talking about rental properties, all coming up on The Pro Show. So today we have a couple of awesome Coldwell Banker agents, Debbie Jacobs from the Tech Center on the right, and Carrie Holmes up in Northern Colorado. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Debbie. How are things going this week?
Hi, Rick. Good morning.
Good.
Very well, thank you.
Good morning. Anything new on the market out there today or this week? What are you seeing? Is it about the same, or are you seeing some changes?
I think that this great weather that we've had really has accentuated the number of open house attendees. So I think that, people are out, they're doing a lot of leaf peeping in Colorado. And just because they're out, I think they see the signs and, whether or not they were intending to come, I think the open house attendance was really great this weekend.
For me, I feel like the fall selling season, which is one of my best selling seasons, believe it or not, has been extended this year just because, as Debbie said, the weather has been nicer longer. And so it's almost like an Indian summer, not really, but so we've got the leaves still on the trees. And so I think almost the change hasn't quite happened. And so we're just getting an extension of the fall selling season, which is great for buyers and sellers both.
Yeah, we've been very busy doing a lot of photos lately and some of them have been, can you get out there and just do 10 exteriors before everything falls apart because it looks so awesome right now? And usually that ends about mid to late September, and here we are almost November, so we haven't gotten the big winds to blow all the leaves off, and we've had really, really good weather this past couple of months, and it really extended the season, so that's good. I think we're due to have a pretty good weekend this weekend, so it's another good weekend to get out and see a home if you're looking, and also if you're looking to sell, this would be a good time to probably pop on the market as well and get it on.
I think if you're thinking about selling and you are ready, I think now would be a good time because we do still see this extended activity and, as Carrie said, this extended selling season. So I think buyers are getting excited again and the sellers are, in a good position at the moment to put it on the market.
So today I want to talk about times when you might want to put your house on the market like immediately because you just got to sell, and what it means to potentially the sale of that home versus taking a little bit of time to make sure, I call doing it right, but instead it really is doing it so that you're marketing it the best. So Carrie, tell me a few examples when somebody might need to just get on the market and you just can't avoid doing your normal process, or do you ever do that?
So, there are several instances where that is important just to get it on the market. For instance, perhaps like an immediate relocation for work or something along those lines. But I am, like you, a fan of doing it right, maybe taking some extra time to do all those little minor things that might make the home shine in its best possible light. My concept or theory is you have one chance to come on the market the first time. So we need to do it right. Because frankly, that's when you're going to get the most amount of exposure, the most amount of showing activity. It's a hot, fresh property. So let's do it right.
Would you agree, Debbie?
Absolutely. And I think that because of the opportunities that we have with Coldwell Banker, we've got so much advertising that we can set in place. And I think that excitement, as Carrie mentioned, and also just enthusiasm about, oh my gosh, look how beautiful this property is, or how, well positioned in the market this property is. We've got to go see this. When you do it right, I think what you're experiencing is you're seeing a lot of people coming for showings. You might be waiting in the car while another agent is actually bringing their client in, and that enthusiasm about that property does create the sense of urgency to put an offer in. So I think if you can do that, that is really the best practice. And I always try to do that if possible.
So what do you Carrie, go ahead.
Rick, I was just going to say, buyers not only pick the homes that they're going to buy online through the photography, but they also eliminate the homes that they're going to go look at based upon the photography online. So if you have a bunch of dirty laundry sitting on the bed in the primary bedroom, that's a deterrent to the prospective buyer. So they could potentially eliminate looking at your house. Again, it's another important reason why you have that professional photography like that you provide with Rocket Media. And that's why I know Debbie can concur with me on this one. We always have professional photography.
I like to curate those photos. So with Rocket Media, we do get multiple of the same room. And I will sit and really go through, if I'm the buyer, what am I going to be looking for? Is there an imperfection that I want to show? Because sometimes there's something on a property, as an example, let's just say that you have power lines in the back. You don't want to hide that because the expectation is going to be greater than when the buyer actually gets there, and then they're disappointed, and then you've got an extended period on the market for that particular property.
So you want the photos to represent the house, is what it sounds like, as opposed to, my opinion is, you're not going to trick anybody into buying a house and they fall in love with the house online and go, oh, I have to buy this house, and then they find there's a hole in the wall, that wasn't shown in the photos. You might as well either get the hole fixed, which is probably preferable, or have let's just say, show that that's there because it's a flaw that might cause somebody, it might be more simpler than that. It might be something like green shag carpet in the basement that hasn't been updated since the 70s, and you go, and then you can point out in the public remarks, carpet and paint allowance or something like that, carpet allowance included. And so it kind of gets people to realize, oh yes, we know this needs to be dealt with, but instead of buying new carpet for that house, we decided we're going to give you an allowance so you can buy the carpet you want. But you have to tell them that, because it might be hard for them to overlook it, right, Carrie?
Absolutely. I would say one caveat to that is, when I'm looking at the pictures, like Debbie had indicated, we're allowed for our particular MLS 40 pictures online. Now, for myself, I don't feel it's important to have all 40 pictures. I would rather have fewer photos that highlight the home. And for me, a buyer, when they walk into the home, they get a feeling of the property, and they will, get that excitement. So really the photos for me are about getting them into the home, showcasing and highlighting the features, but just not putting every single picture up, just enough that buyers want to come in, see the property, and fall in love.
Do you find, Carrie, that changes? I've heard the further you get from whatever city center we're talking about, the more you want to have, because that some agents want to show it before they have to. People will drive out there and be disappointed because you didn't show something that they might want.
Rick, in that case, honestly, what I'm probably doing is I'm doing aerial photography. I'm doing the Matterport tour with you, all those different features, because, a lot of times we'll have people come from out of state or are shopping from areas that aren't local. And so we want to get them enough information, again, so they get excited to make that flight out here. But in an example of perhaps acreage, absolutely, we don't want to to misrepresent anything by any means and give them as much information as possible. And on a property like that, you're probably going to get 40 pictures anyways. You might have outbuildings, horse facilities, barns. It's probably a larger property anyways. So I think that's important to make sure you're highlighting all those features at that time.
Debbie, what are other things you do in order to get the house ready? It seems like you'd want to get it ready even before we show up to take pictures.
Well, I think cleanliness is very important. If I have time, let's just say that this property doesn't need to be on the market immediately, and you do have a little time to get it prepped properly. For instance, let's say that we're going to go on in the fall, like next week. Well, I would advise the client to take all of the the summer clothes and the things that they're not going to be utilizing and get those packed up so that the house shows very, very clean, very tidy. I have a housekeeper that I usually recommend if they do not have one. I like to see the furnace get cleaned and the windows definitely, front step, front porch, that type of tidying before we get to photography so that, to Carrie's point, I'm going to show the best of the photos and really entice the buyer to come and visit the property.
So do you stage, Carrie or Debbie?
So personally, I do. That is part of the full service that I provide. I think it's really important to highlight the features of the home. Believe it or not, when a property is vacant, it shows smaller because there's no scale to the property. So when you have furniture in, not only people can envision how the furniture should be placed or can be placed, it shows the room to the true size that it should be and actually is. So staging is incredibly important in my mind. I mean, a couple of years ago, homes were selling off a weekend, but still in those points in that market, it was important for me to continue staging just because it gets the seller the most amount of money possible. And that's why you hire us, and that's what we're here to do.
Debbie, what about you?
The exact same. I'm a full stage, full service agent, and that is that is part of the package that I provide, as well as the photography and the other social media out and video and the other things. But exactly, I think that being staged in a property, having it very clean and tidy, and that first impression, I think I'd heard years ago that people really start to get comfortable and decide on buying a house in the first like 40 or 50 seconds of entering in the home. So that in front impact, being staged and clean and prepped properly, is really very important.
So
I
go ahead.
want to just jump in based upon Debbie's comment about cleaning the furnace and maybe the top of the hot water heater. From my perspective, there's nothing worse than coming into a beautiful home and then you go to check out the systems and the mechanicals and you go in there and there's an inch thick of dust on top of that hot water heater. It makes me worried. How long since these have been addressed, taken care of? What are the other things that perhaps the seller might be missing in this home as far as maintaining? So those little attention to details can go a really long way. And it's not something that costs a lot of money. Yourself, you can go in there and take a cloth and wipe that down. And just, again, it's all those attention to details that are critically important when you're getting ready to put the home on the market.
And Debbie, how about decluttering? How do you do a lot? Do you encourage the homeowner to do that? Do you do that? How does that work?
Absolutely. So what I typically like to do is I go and walk through the property before we get to the photography stage. And I will take a non-professional photo on my camera, and then I will outline to the seller, okay, we need to move this chair, because let's say it's just a little torn up or whatever. We need to move the dog bed or the dog crate. And so I will give them a list of things that they could do that would really help to declutter the property and give the property the best case scenario for the buyer's perspective from when they're shopping online. As an example, sometimes you'll see photography, and I'm glad that we never experienced this with Rocket Media, but the bed of the photography will be the entire picture, and you're not selling furniture. You're selling a property. So they really need to be able to see how big is the room, not how big is the bed. So I think that that's really, key to be able to tell them ahead of time what things to do.
On the flip side, I also find that homeowners will look at the picture, these are the sellers, and will say, the color of my sofa isn't exactly that color. And I ask you, are you selling the home furnished? And they say, no. I'm like, okay, well, we'll try and get it fixed, but it isn't really keeping the house from being sold. How much? So when I did my book a few years ago called Holy Crap, I'm Selling My Home, Now What? It was for when I don't have Carrie or Debbie to help me. And one of my suggestions is go in to a room, take half the stuff out, go back in, take another half out. Is that too much? Or does it depend on the house? Obviously, if some people live like a staged home, but most people don't. What do you think, Carrie?
I think it all depends on the particular seller, and there's always an exception to every rule. So I think that's a great tool to use, especially if you don't have that consultation or that realtor that's supporting you through this process. So the exception to the rule, sometimes there's individuals that are downsizing and just don't have the capability to make those changes. And so I think it's important that they understand that we're still going to be able to work with you and get your home sold. So I think a lot of times people panic, oh, my closet's not decluttered. Some of these things, well, we're not going to take a picture of the closet unless it's a phenomenal closet.
Right.
And I think people just need to understand that there's always an exception to the rule, especially maybe if you're downsizing. The one thing that I really try to emphasize, though, in that particular instance is let's at a minimum get the personal pictures off the walls, out of the property. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in with people and they have, maybe a cute little picture of the family on the wall or the dog, and how they're distracted. And the buyer looks at the pictures instead of the beautiful view, the high ceilings, the amazing kitchen, the open layout. So we just want to make sure that we're working to the best of our abilities to get that highlighted for the sellers.
And I find that if you are packing things up, for instance, off-season items, and you do have the opportunity to do that ahead of time, it doesn't matter how packed the garage is. So if you can put things in the garage, the photography of the garage is not going to be critical. People understand that you are moving and that you're expecting to sell the property. So that garage space is really a great, or an empty space in the basement, as an example. And by decluttering, I think you give the full expanse of the room visually, and when the buyer comes in. So I agree. Let's take 50% out, and then let's go back in and, maybe rearrange things. And of course I do that, and I do have help that I hire that would be able to come in and move some furniture around if needed. Carpets clean, windows washed. I think that's really key as well.
I personally, if the choice is putting everything in the garage or the basement or in a pod that's going to sit right in front of the garage door, I'd go for the garage, because there are so many times we show up, oh yeah, there's a pod in the garage. Well, how are we going to get a front shot of the house without this big pod? So you want to think about that as well. And of course, the neighborhoods don't let you put the pods on the street. So, and then of course the pod delivery or company that's going to take it away don't show up when they're supposed to. So that's often if you're going to use a pod, make sure you kind of figure that out. But that's what Debbie and Carrie will help you with as well. What do you guys think? Pods? No pods?
I'm a huge fan of pods if they're picked up prior to the photography, as you said, Rick. It's an opportunity if you have that delivery that you're going to have all the pod filled up. You can do it at your leisure. You can pack the things that you want to pack into that property, or excuse me, that pod, and then take your time doing that. I'd like to move it once. Hopefully that's the case. So we're not necessarily moving things into a storage unit and then moving it again. So it is actually a nice option for people to put things in the pod, have them store it, and then have that delivered to your new place, and then you can unload it once. But like Debbie said, I would prefer to have things floor to ceiling in the garage, in that vacant space. I always say we're selling square footage. So the more square footage we can highlight inside the home, the more money for the seller.
That's a good rule of thumb. And obviously, these are kind of general rules of thumb because if you've got a phenomenal garage, you don't want to fill that up either because there are a lot of really cool garages out there with lifts and storage everywhere, and you want to highlight that if that's a key feature of the home. So you want to keep that in mind before. And of course, Carrie or Debbie would say, yeah, don't fill up the garage with your stuff because we want to highlight this. But other things, how about outside, Debbie, getting that ready?
Well, I think outside, especially in the front, is very important. And there's some very inexpensive things that a seller can do. For instance, mulch. If they've got, especially now, right? Because we're getting that fall season. So we've got, some plants that, have had their heyday over the summer, and now probably that mulched area would be much to the seller's benefit. Just again, it's going to look like the property has been well maintained, which of course you would hope that it would have been, and it will give you a big bang for, I don't know, a bag of mulch is I think $3 at the moment. So very well used money.
When we're talking exterior, Rick, I think for me, one of the important things is that you don't have seasonal decorations on the exterior, even interior, that highlight when the home was originally put on the market. So for example, if there's Halloween decorations out there or Christmas blow-ups and inflatables, and we have the pictures taken at that time, then it might only be 2 weeks old on the market, but when we come around to January and we see these old Christmas photos, I think, oh my gosh, this home has been on the market a long time. So I think there is some strategy as far as that goes. And while they're nice and they're beautiful and they're fun and you can put them up after the pictures, I would say definitely pause and think about that before you have the photographer come.
That's a good point. We see that a lot. We go from doing quick pictures before the leaves fall off to doing quick pictures before the decorations go up. So that happens a lot. Debbie?
I do like to stage the patio area though. So even if it's winter or, now that we're approaching this late fall, what I do like to do is I like to bring in the pillows and the dishes and all of that and set that patio table up, set the expectation of what the lifestyle would be during the summer months and the spring months and how the buyers would be able to enjoy this outdoor space, which of course in Colorado, that's a big part of our lifestyle.
So that I have, obviously this is a generality, but typically if you've got a house that's in pretty good condition to begin with, and you walk in and you sign the listing agreement, what's your normal turn time, Debbie, from when you they sign the listing agreement from when you think it's probably appropriate to put it on? If you don't have a ton of staging to do with it, what do you normally see to get it marketed properly?
So I like a 10-day window minimum. I really like a 2.5 to 3 weeks if I can get it. And that gives me the window washing, the carpet cleaning, the decluttering, my staging consult, which, that I provide, and then the social media, the video walkthroughs, all the photography, And I like to have everything kind of set in place because I have a very specific timeline of when I put it on the MLS for coming soon. When do I put the video coming soon out? When does that go out on LinkedIn and Google and all of that? So I have a very specific timeline. So if I can get 10 days, that would be terrific. That's really my sweet spot, I guess.
Carrie?
I'm probably about a week. So I find a lot of people when they're ready to roll and put their home on the market, they're ready to roll. There's others, like you said, where we need to do some fine tuning, and that takes a little bit longer. But when somebody's actually at the point that they're signing the listing agreement, for the most part, they're going to want it on the market in a timely fashion. So for myself, it's about a week turnaround as far as that goes. I think one of the important things to keep in mind as well is we're talking seasonality. So I might tell you to wait a couple weeks if it's the week before Christmas, 2 days before Christmas. Maybe this isn't the ideal time to be putting a home on the market. So I might say, well, let's wait until after the first of the year. So I think that timing is incredibly important when you're looking at putting the property on the market.
And these two have seen all the different markets, and some years that doesn't matter. Because if you put it on 3 days before Christmas, it's going to be under contract 2 days before Christmas. Other years like this, we're back in a normal market where I think that really does make a difference. And so that timing is important. If it's a week, Carrie, are you talking a week before you want to do a coming soon, or a week before, going on the market like on Thursday, or how does that work?
So, Rick, I understand the coming soon attraction, but also I can't sell the home if it's in a coming soon status. So for myself, it feels like let's just get it on the market. Let's get that exposure. Let's get that traffic. And again, going into the fall season here, I'd rather just put it on the market than maybe a coming soon scenario. I would do a coming soon situation if perhaps we are doing those final little touches and aren't quite ready to put it on the market. Maybe we do need to get the carpets cleaned or something along those lines. But I would rather, as far as like window cleaning, something along those lines, in my opinion, it depends on the property. But if it's just kind of a traditional sale, maybe in a starter home price point, I don't want to delay putting it on the market waiting for a window cleaner to come out and do that on the property, because it's the home that's going to sell. It's getting in there, getting those buyers through the property that's important. So I think from my perspective, time is important.
But that probably also would be price point. Obviously, if you're really trying to gain some price point, some interest in a higher end property, you might do that.
Well, especially on a higher end property where we've got cathedral ceilings with tons of windows, it's going to be incredibly important that those windows are clean, shine, and look to the best of their abilities. Obviously, they're going to photograph better. So you're spot on, Rick, when you say it's all about price point.
My biggest concern is that, okay, you said a week, you said 10 days. How long does it take to get it staged? A couple of days, right? And then you've also then got photography, which you got to get in the mix. And then you have to do your marketing materials. Is a week enough time to do all that stuff? And I guess it depends on what time of the week we start it, right? Because if you start on a Thursday, that's a lot different if we can get in there on a Monday to do photos, right, Carrie?
Absolutely. So it does boil down to that. But believe it or not, all homes don't need to be staged. Some people live in a show home quality house. So there are those that I walk in, I'm like, golly, we could take the pictures tomorrow. This is fantastic. So it just depends on the particular property. But my goal is to have it up on the market within 7 days. But again, you're spot on when you say, Rick, that it depends on when we start. I'd love to put the home on the market on a Thursday. That's a great time. We get that weekend traffic. So I prefer that. And a lot of times we do take photos at the first of the week just so we can target that weekend traffic.
So, Debbie, I assume that Thursday would probably be your launch date too. So 10 days, you really want to start talking to them like the Monday before that Thursday, right?
Correct. So I really like the coming soon. I really like the coming soon on Saturday, Sunday, with a active on the MLS showing starts the following Thursday. That's kind of have been my go-to. If possible, obviously some properties need to get on the market a little sooner, but that is what I do like to do. And I also think that one big factor is, what is our competition? If I'm coming in on the market at a certain price point and I've got 6 or 7 other houses that are comparable that are in that same price point, the condition of the property is going to be much more important to be able to go onto the market and be in near perfect condition, because you're competing with like properties with like price points. So I feel like that also impacts my decision about how many days it takes to get on the market.
And
That is incredibly important, Rick. Great comment there, Debbie, as far as throwing that out there, especially as we are getting into more of a balanced market. It is important. Now, Rick, I say, a week's time, but I also have properties where it's 2 months, 3 months. I've had even up to 6 months to get that property ready to go on the market. So you're just really going to have to work with your realtor and find out what makes sense to help you get the most amount of money possible, if that's your goal. Sometimes our goal is time. And so, you've got to be moved. You're going to start that new job in Georgia or wherever you're going. So it's incredibly important to think about all the variables. Sometimes it's not all about the money. Sometimes it is. So just strategizing with your agent is incredibly important to get those goals accomplished.
And possibly you might have a probate property where there's going to be an estate sale, and as soon as the estate sale is over, or maybe the property is in a condition that they don't really want to retain any of the items that are left in the property, and really that then becomes maybe an off-market scenario, or where you would be marketing to your investor group. And I'm sure Carrie has an investor group as well as I do, that you can go out and say, here's something that it would be possibly a great fix and flip scenario. And that, of course, is timing on the market is much different than, a higher end, resale that you're looking to gain the most amount of money.
is time money? Meaning the more time on most properties, if it's not brand new or not, they don't live in staged, does that typically translate into more money? Or here again, it's all generalities. But Carrie, what do you think?
Not always. So I would say that it just depends on seasonality for myself more than anything. As we're coming up into that holiday season, I almost want to call it a shoulder season here. When my clients are like, well, I want to look towards the spring selling season, some people think that's more maybe ideal in summer. And for me, up here in Northern Colorado, I would say March is prime selling season. So maybe we're looking at the 1st of February. Maybe we want to get on the forefront of that spring selling season. My theory is I would rather be one of few listings than one of many listings. So these are just some,
Tips.
Time is money, as you said. But yeah, you got to listen to your agent.
Yeah. Debbie, what are your thoughts?
Every property is unique and every scenario is unique. And the more experienced your real estate agent is, that is where you're really going to be able to benefit, because sometimes fast and before Thanksgiving is great. And sometimes redoing that bathroom that's only going to cost maybe $6,000 or $7,000 to be able to get that antiquated bathroom up to speed, and waiting until March, maybe that's the best use of your time and the best use of being able to get the best price. So I think that every scenario really depends on what's going on with that particular property, and your agent will be able to help you figure that out.
And like every week, we have Nancy Alexander to give us some mortgage insights. And the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about conventional and FHA mortgages. Today, we're going to talk about VA mortgages and why would somebody want to and how do they qualify. So we'll start with the last one first. How do you qualify for a VA mortgage?
Well, a VA loan, you got to be a veteran, right?
Okay.
You have to be either a current member of the services, or you've got to be out of service, but have to be that veteran. And trust me, if everybody could do a VA loan, if they understood it, they would do it, because it is the best loan on the planet. It is a wonderful entitlement that is given to the veteran for the service that they've provided.
Well, that's awesome. And obviously, whoever qualifies for this, we thank for them for their service and protecting our country. And this is something well deserved by them. And there are some spousal benefits. There are criteria for that. We're not going to go into that today. And obviously, you can't be dishonorably discharged and things like that.
Right.
But if you're honorably discharged, so what are some of the benefits of doing a VA?
So first of all, I think what a lot of people don't know is the VA goes up to $2 million. So if you're purchasing up to $2 million, can you do it 0% down? You can, which is amazing. And you typically, your interest rate is a 0.5 point, sometimes as much as 3/4 of a point less than what conforming loan would be or a jumbo loan would be. So great advantage there. The disadvantage of a VA loan is the funding fee. So the funding fee changes with whether you're a first-time user or a multiple-time user. And that funding fee, again, is an expense for using the loan. However, Rick, like you and I just finished talking about, if the veteran has 10% or greater disability, which really every veteran that is served is going to be given that 10%. It's whether they've applied for it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've got that 10% disability or greater, the funding fee goes away. So you're 100% financing,
Okay.
no mortgage insurance, right? Like the conventional or the FHA. So no monthly, they on the mortgage insurance, and you're no money down, and you're 3/4, let's say, of a point better in interest rate.
Wow.
Lots of advantages.
That's a great advantage. And you were talking about first time versus next time. Are there limitations on how many times you can use this benefit?
There isn't. It's a great question. And no, there isn't a limitation. And you can even use your VA more than once at the same time, as long as your eligibility is calculated that you can use it. So I have many clients that have a VA loan. They started with a VA loan. They're now buying their second home. They want to keep that first home as a rental. They can turn that loan into a rental property or that home and purchase on the VA again on that second home, as long again as they fit into that eligibility.
And do you require as a broker that certificate of eligibility? And if so, how do they get it?
Well, that's another great question. VA set this up years ago. It used to be that the veteran had to come with what we call their DD-214 and their certificate of eligibility. And so those forms deal with certificate of eligibility, talks about where they fall with that disability, if they have one. And the DD-214 states how they've been discharged, right? And so in turn, now the VA drops it in automatically when I've put a VA loan into the loan system.
Interesting. Okay. So it sounds like if you are eligible, you should take advantage of this benefit. It's a huge benefit.
Oh my God. The only thing that I would look at is if you get up in that 1.5 million, again, like we were talking about, and you're a first time user and you've got that 3.3% funding fee, go ahead and do the comparison to the jumbo loan. I still think you're going to come out ahead on that VA. It is a brilliant, wonderful product.
Well, awesome. If you have additional questions about VA mortgages, please reach out to Nancy. You can call her on the number on the screen. And speaking of jumbos, let's talk about those next week. What do you think?
We got a deal.
So since this is the week of Halloween, it just passed, we thought we'd do some real estate horror stories. And I understand that Debbie had a really good one that happened just recently.
Yes. So last week, I had a seller that had packed up their home. House was clean. Everything was ready to go. They were just packing their bags for the last minute to put everybody into the U-Haul. And one of their cats got very scared and found a hole that he was able to get in between the main floor and the basement ceiling, and had wedged himself all the way in the back. And it took him 4 days to be able to get the cat out of the ceiling. And thankfully, the buyers were so gracious. They understood what was going on, and they helped the sellers trying to strategize of how to get the cat out. But that cat did not want to leave.
Was it a black cat? That's all I want to know.
I was just thinking that. Well, it was black and white cat.
Okay.
Does that matter?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
Is that okay?
probably after being between the floor and the ceiling for a week or 4 days, it probably was more black than white.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Well, I had one where the agent called me up and said, Rick, I got a call from another agent who is a buyer's agent saying, is that house haunted? And I said, what are you talking about? And they're going, well, look at the living room picture and then look in the kitchen, which was beyond on the left-hand side. And there was a translucent person in that shot. And I'm like, okay, first of all, my answer was, are you kidding me? And then my next answer was, let me go look at the photo. And it turns out, since we do 7 different exposures, the homeowner had walked across that transom in the kitchen during one of the longer exposures, which made them translucent because the first 5 exposures, they weren't there. And then the 6th and 7th, they were. So it was like a ghostly figure going across there. So it wasn't really a ghost story, but somebody thought it was a ghost story. So, Carrie, I understand you may have had a ghost story as well.
Well, jumping on the ghost story bandwagon here, I did have a listing out in Greeley years ago, and it was the early 1900s home, Victorian, had been lived in for a long time. And the seller of mine was doing a fix and flip, which is basically fixing up the property and reselling it. And my seller, who's I'd done several deals with over the years, had some extra abilities and intuitions. You might call him a medium. Well, anyways, the home wasn't selling, and we got feedback from these buyers that they felt the home was haunted more than once. So I went to my client and I just said, hey, is this property got any ghosts or spirits, etc.? And he said, Carrie, believe it or not, it does. And so this had been an issue. It kept coming up. So actually we went in, we had the home smudged and saged and all these different things. Turns out the spirits did finally leave and we were able to sell the home. So it just goes to show we come up with all kinds of crazy stories and situations here as us realtors that have to deal with.
They see everything. And the best part of my job is hearing some of these stories as I'm out taking pictures, because I just heard one the other day where they went to close. And this is not really a ghost story. It's a horror story because the buyer had lost their job, which is bad for the buyer, but they hadn't told anybody, and they did a verification of employment, and they weren't able to close. They were at the closing table and were not able to close because the buyer didn't qualify at that point. So that's not a good horror story, but it's one that I'm sure has happened many times. Usually they catch it beforehand. I guess the moral of the story is, if instead of having that horror story, tell your lender, tell your agent what's going on in your life relative to a job if you lose it. So any other stories you got that you want to share, or we're good?
Oh, golly, Rick, we all have tons of horror stories. We could make a whole show out of that. So definitely next year, I think we're going to need to focus on horror stories.
All right. We'll do a whole Halloween show next year just on horror stories. That'll be good.
Absolutely.
And like every week, we have Greg Batchelor from Real Property Management. Hi, Greg. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing great. And last week we talked about single-family homes and the benefits and drawbacks for renting a single-family home. This week, let's talk about townhomes and condos. First of all, what's the difference?
Yeah, great question. So single-family homes is something that has an individually deeded parcel where the house sits, where the land sits, tends to have bigger yards, some of those kinds of things. Condos on the other side of that would be the most equivalent to an apartment complex, except they're individually owned and deeded. And then townhomes kind of fit right in between. They're a bit of a hybrid. They are individually owned and deeded typically, but then they have a small yard, typically a fenced-in area, some of those kinds of things. Those are the biggest differences between single family versus townhome and condo.
And of course, some townhomes, especially over on the west side, now have rooftop decks, as opposed to having the yard space. They put it all up on top, and so obviously that might be a benefit if you're looking for a rooftop deck to rent a townhome that has one. What are some of the other benefits?
Yeah, that's a great benefit. As a matter of fact, the newer complexes, they are just focusing more on what people value amenities wise as of today versus when a condo complex was built 30 or 40 years ago. What society valued then obviously was different. But then some of the other benefits to owning these, lower maintenance. Some require no maintenance. If you have a first or second, third story condo, there may be no maintenance involved. A townhome, very little maintenance in that you may just have to mow the yard and perhaps that's it, something along those lines. So for a lot of folks who want a lifestyle that doesn't require high maintenance, condos and townhomes are perfect for that.
And of course, if you're looking for a swimming pool, workout room, depending on the building, you might have those. And then, of course, if you want a swimming pool, you probably need to look into one that has an indoor.
Absolutely.
And of course, best of all worlds is a condo with indoor and outdoor. So, and really top of the line condos I've seen have the pool on the roof, so you get everything.
Yes. Yep. Totally true.
And
the pool, the barbecue, they call them infinity pools. And there's a lot more complexes that are putting in infinity pools, especially with the beautiful views of the Rockies that we have, depending on where the condo complex is built, which direction it faces, et cetera. There's a lot of nice benefits that go along with that.
And how does it work relative to utilities? Is that more likely to be taken care of in a townhome or condo versus like a single family home, or how's that work?
Yeah, great question. So in condos, typically all utilities are part of the rent. So your gas, your electric, your water, your trash, it's all there. Now, sometimes with the condo or with the townhome lease, that you're responsible for the water, i.e. how much water you put on the lawn, in the lawn area. It's usually not substantial, but obviously you got to water it, either hand water it, or it's got a small sprinkler system, something along those lines. And so everything else is typically included because the trash dumpster is right out there. XL, they typically put that in. Now, sometimes there will be landlords that will charge separately or have you pay for your own utilities, i.e. gas, electric, et cetera.
And how does it work relative to getting those payments, or is it all just handled through your rent payment, especially with the condo?
Yeah, most of it is typically handled just right through the rent payment. Now, water is its own separate item because that's a lienable item. Oftentimes, you are not allowed to put that particular item into a tenant's name directly. You can put gas, electric, any trash, any of those kinds of things in a tenant's name directly. But because water is a lienable item attached to the property, most water municipalities will require you to keep water in the owner's name. So it is included in the rent and or it's charged separately in the rent and just added into the rental amount. Landlord pays it, and then the tenant basically reimburses the landlord accordingly.
Well, that's awesome. If you want to get a hold of Greg, you can do so at the number on the screen. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. And whether you're looking to lease or whether you have a home or townhome or condo that you're looking to lease, he'd love to talk to you. Next week, let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is insurance. I think it's important to see how that works relative to rentals. How's that sound?
Sounds great, Rick. We'll talk then.
Okay, thanks. Well, this has been an interesting conversation today, especially about getting your home ready. If you want to get a hold of Carrie or Debbie, you can do so by contacting them at the numbers on the screen. And thanks again for coming again today. If you want to see previous episodes, be sure to check them out at theproshow.com or at your podcast where you get your podcasts. It's on audio. Obviously, it's on YouTube as well. And we look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Thanks.